You're watching Fowler Success Safe at Home. In this podcast series, we are interviewing SDSU alumni to get their perspectives on COVID-19, working from home, and what they think SDSU students need to know in order to navigate the workplace in the new normal. Welcome to another episode of Fowler Success. Today we're talking to Stu Massengil. Stu is currently a national trainer for Tony Robbins and is also currently the founder and creator of the Finding Direction podcast and the Finding Direction University. And he graduated with a bachelor's in business in management with an emphasis in entrepreneurship in 2019. Thank you for joining us, Stu. Happy to have you here.
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. It's an honor to be here, man. I massively appreciate it. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
All right, awesome. Since the focus of these Zoom conversations, given the state of the world, a lot of this has to do with COVID-19, but some of this is more broad kind of advice. So we'll start with some of like the current changes kind of questions.
Yeah.
All right. So you've spent several years working in meetings, in events industry, right? How has this COVID moment changed that space? And what of these changes do you see as temporary, and which ones do you think are going to be more permanent?
Yeah, I think the biggest shift where it really all started with was how people reacted to the situation, because COVID's been crazy, to say the least. Like we're both in California. I'm in San Diego still, and we just got the Amber Alert earlier. That was like official. We're all on lockdown again, right? So it's like the world's going through the crazy stuff, and we're in the event business. I am with Tony Robbins, where we usually get 10,000 people together in an event. And I think some people, when this happened, it was like our life's ruined, and other people went, okay, this is a speed bump. This is a hurdle, as any entrepreneur does. How can we overcome this pivot and figure out how to adapt and continue to grow the business? And so sort of what we've done and how we've seen the events space change is we've, as a company, built basically a fully virtual immersive stadium. Not everybody has those resources. I understand that, but we've shifted it to doing this virtually now because we can't do in-stadium events anymore. And the craziest shift that I've seen, that I think is the biggest positive out of this, is before, let's say you have a live in-person event. Let's say you do it in San Diego. Only people from San Diego can come to that event, right? Maybe some people from LA come, some people from Orange County. Your reach isn't as far, versus once you go into the virtual platform, now you can reach the world. And so that's been the biggest shift, is just really opening up the reach, I think. And so I think as we shift back into whatever the quote unquote normal will become, I think we'll eventually get back to doing in-person things again, but we will absolutely continue to still be doing this virtual way of reaching people, because it's just a bigger way you can reach people.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've heard from other people as well that, they're getting greater attendance in events because of, the geographic limitations are taken off.
Right.
I've gone to conferences in South Carolina, North Carolina virtually since this started. And that it's interesting that you see the demand for kind of like the blended experience being something that's going to be important going forward. I guess that leads pretty well into this next question, which is, in addition to being a national trainer for Tony Robbins, you've been working on your Finding Direction podcast and launching the Finding Direction University. So in this kind of environment and going forward, do you see an increased demand for content? And do you think that these like online learning opportunities are going to stay important, once everything goes back?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think this is kind of a like a conscious opening that's happened. It's sort of like you look at the work from home situation, where now companies can no longer say, hey, if you work from home, you won't be as productive. People have proved you can work from home and be productive. So I think now that these sort of opportunities have been opened up virtually, even as things go back to whatever this normal will begin. I definitely don't think these opportunities will go away. And I think this space is just going to continue to like massively grow because people will see the opportunity there.
Yeah, and I mean, that's really interesting that you see, that there's so much potential for growth here, right? And you work for Tony Robbins, who's pretty much a household name in business.
Yeah.
Right? And outside of the work that you've done, is there anything that Tony is doing, or that another trainer or somebody else in the Tony Robbins organization is doing, that you found inspiring or innovative in response to all these changes?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've seen that he's done and other successful people in the world have done is it's easy to get caught up in this COVID thing's happening. How do I get back to normal? The reality is, if you have that focus, you're not going to be able to adapt and grow. And so the beautiful thing that I've seen that Tony's done and some other people in the industry have done is by allowing yourself to let go of that and start to look at, well, what opportunities could this mean, right? How is life happening for me, not to me, right? It's like now, 6 months ago, we never thought we would be doing events. Like we're doing an event right now. There's people in Australia that wake up at 1 a.m. and they do the event until 4 p.m, and then they sleep from 4 p.m. until midnight. They wake up and they do another day. And it's like, people are so committed to that. And it's so crazy that you would never think that would be a real thing until you are forced to figure it out. So I think it's just allowing yourself to let go of normal, right? Stop wondering when it's going to be normal, how it's going to be normal, if it's going to go back to normal, and figure out how can you adapt and shift. And I think that's the biggest thing I've seen Tony do in a pretty incredible way.
And that's wild to think, like, with that huge time change, right? And I guess that the point you made that's really interesting and kind of the big point is that this is really not a temporary change in some things. It's more of a paradigm shift, and that certain things that are happening are going to stay around. But change is hard, right? Like, what have been, even if you're adept at dealing with change is hard. What have been the most difficult aspects of this, do you think, for you, professionally as well as personally?
Yeah. There's a quote, I'm going to butcher it a little bit, and I have no idea who said it. So we can maybe look it up later, but it's the illiterate in the 21st century won't be those who can't read and write. It'll be those who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn. And so I think the biggest challenge, and it was a challenge for me at first as well, was looking at how do we unlearn everything that we've done over the last several years, because we've been in that sort of a world and we've now transitioned into this world. So how do we learn that? We learned it once. How do we unlearn it and now relearn to what we're doing now? Because, and this is kind of a continuous conversation, but it's like, sometimes we get so caught up, we get so stuck in, this is how I did it, this is how things supposed to be, this is how things go, that stops us from the actual opportunity. And one thing that I would say is like a really simple tool that people can use in their life to start to shift the results they're getting is one of the distinctions Tony made, and he's worked with 50 million people now. So a lot of people, you're going to learn a lot. And one of the things he's found out is that every moment of our life, we are making 3 decisions, and they have a massive controlling force over our life. And the 3 decisions is, number 1, what are you going to focus on? Number 2 is, what is the meaning that you're going to give it? And then number 3, most importantly, what are you going to do about it? Right? In life, 10% is what happens to us, and 90% is what we do to it, what we do about it. Right? So like, let's say we have 2 people, COVID happened, and they're in the event space, right? Just to take this as an example. One person, the focus they give it is, oh my God, we can't do events. How are we going to get back to doing events? How are we going to fix this? Another person goes, we can't do events. How can we adjust? How can we pivot? How can we shift? Right? And so there's 2 different focuses. The meaning they give it, one person is, this could be the death of our business. The other person, the meaning they give it is, this could be a way we grow our impact in our business. And then the actions they take from that clearly are going to be different actions. So I would say, for someone who's listening to this, you really want to start to ask yourself, well, over the last 6 months, or over the last 3 months, over the last month, over the last week, what are you predominantly focusing on? What is the meaning you're attaching to that? And then ultimately, what are the actions you're taking from that? And if you can shift your focus, You can shift your meaning, you can shift your actions, ultimately shifting the results that you're getting.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's like, I really like that point a lot. And there's I guess like a really famous quote from Henry Ford that's like, fortune favors the prepared mind, right?
I love that.
You have not 100% control over your situation, but the more, prepared you are and adaptable you are, the better you're going to react to the changing situation.
Yeah, 100%.
And you pretty recently graduated from the program here, and I guess my idea of business education, or what business education means at SDSU, is learning how to learn, and learning kind of the foundational skills that you can refine and retool and apply. What aspects do you think of the business education that you got here at San Diego State have been, most beneficial to you since you've entered, the workspace?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was really making SDSU like a playground. And what I mean by that is like SDSU gives you such an incredible platform to play, to try, to taste, to experiment. And I'm a massive believer that the way you figure out what you want to do with your life, the way that you build clarity in your life, is you try a ridiculous amount of things. And eventually you're going to figure out, I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't like that. But this actually lights me up. And so the biggest thing for me, I would say, was twofold. When I went to San Diego State, I literally would throw events. Like I would go around to classrooms and say, hey, I'm going to throw this event. It's all about communication and networking. And I would promote it. We'd get like 50 people there. We did it 2 times. And it gave me an opportunity to try, right? I think that's the most important thing, is trying and experimenting while you're there. The second thing that I would say was most powerful was the network, and like leveraging the student card you have, because like your life will, like the doors you open for yourself, the opportunities you create will come back to your network and who you know and how strong of a relationship you have with those people. And so as you're a student, you have such an incredible playing card to be able to go to anyone in SDSU's network, and even people outside of SDSU's network, and say, hey, I'm a student right now at SDSU. I would love it if I could take you to lunch, if I could pick your brain and just ask you a couple questions about how you got to where you are. And some people now may go, okay, COVID, Stu, we can't take people to lunch, or someone's in a different state. What I teach the people that I work with is take them to virtual lunch, right? And like create an experience. Say like, hey, Tim, I want to take you to lunch to pick your brain. I'm going to send DoorDash to your door. Just tell me what you want for lunch. I'll have it sent to your door so you get the food you want. Now it's free. You got to eat lunch anyway. Now you get to do it with a friend, and I can pick your brain, right? And it's like, then that gives you an opportunity to network. So I would say the playground aspect of it, and then most importantly, really was just the networking that you can do from everything SDSU gives you.
Yeah, the networking aspect, I think, is like a great point. One of the people I interviewed in this series earlier on, who works in a kind of talent acquisition capacity, Eric Paul, he said, it never hurts to ask, right? If you want to work somewhere, ask somebody and that works there what they're looking for. And kind of the idea of, you get these internship opportunities, and in the curriculum, you have the opportunity to even apply these as classes, right? So you kind of have these what we call in higher ed experiential learning opportunities, right, which is that playground concept. And while you were here, you were active in the Lab and Entrepreneurship Center, which also runs the Zip Launchpad, which where faculty and other people around campus mentor aspiring startups and help them get to launch phases. When you utilized, the Lab and Center, how do you think that experience, prepared you? What aspects of that did you think were most beneficial?
Yeah, I think, again, kind of twofold. One, the Lab, and shout out if you haven't met Alex DeNoble or Bernie Schroeder, go take them to lunch, take them to a virtual lunch. You pick their brain, they'll teach you a massive amount. And they're kind of the two people that have sort of led the Lab and program over the last decade now, or several years. And I would say the two biggest things is like, one, they really give you more of a hands-on approach of like entrepreneurship and building business. So that is a massive part, again, dabbling into experiential learning, right? You're not just going to sit in a classroom and say, oh, if you theory, if you build a business, how do you do X, Y, and Z? They're like, no, let's build a business, let's do it. Right. And you're going to learn more that way. So I would say that was one big aspect, was just building and playing around in that space. And then the second thing is the Lavin, I think, kind of gave me, and I think it gives a lot of the people in the Lavin program, like a exclamation point at the end of your networking journey. And sort of what I mean by that is just by being in the Lavin network, you're exposed to other people that are mentors for that program. So that gives you an incredible opportunity to network with them. And then again, as you meet anyone else, you can sort of leverage the Lavin program as a thing within SDSU's network. Because a lot of people that are alumni or things like that, especially if they're an entrepreneur, they know what Lavin is. So if they hear, oh, you're one of 30 Lavin students that they selected this year, people are going to go, okay, well, like, I would love to have a conversation with you. So that's kind of two things I would say that the Lavin really helped me with. And one thing to kind of just go back on the question before that, when talking about like the biggest benefits of SDSU, I think as we dabble into this experiential learning again, it's like internships. Like I thought my dream was to work in the action sports industry, right? We were talking about this before. And I was like, if I could work for an action sports company, like my life would be so sick. I would love life. I would like wake up every day and be like, oh my God, I can't believe this is my life. And so I got an internship at Vans through my network at SDSU. And while I was working there, it is the most kick-ass culture. I don't know if I can say that. Sorry. It's an unbelievable culture. And it was really cool. But when I worked there, the biggest thing that kind of kicked in for me is I went, oh my God, I love doing action sports, but I don't actually love working in the space. What I want to do is actually want to help directly pour into people and kind of go into the personal development industry. But it was like, because I tasted that and went through I think it was like a 12-week internship, I got to have that clarity so that when I did graduate, now I was like, okay, I'm not going to try to go get in the actual sports industry. I'm going to go to the personal development space. So I think that's another massive thing.
Yeah, I think that's really, great advice, because I one of the mentors at Zip, Chris Holbrook, he told me, he's like, the students that come through here really benefit even if the business doesn't work, because they learn something real, right? They learn
totally
market dynamics, and even though Vans has such a cool history and stuff, it's still a product business, and ultimately at the end of the day, you're selling shoes and clothes. So it's not about the product isn't helping people per se, right? So like whatever your role is, kind of dictates what you're doing. So having the options to kind of, see the dynamics of how different positions in a business work through the entrepreneurship or like getting internships is super valuable.
Yeah. And I would say that is not me putting Vans down. If you want to work for a really cool company, go get an internship or go work for Vans. They're an unbelievable culture, a really cool company.
Yeah, you can't buy that history, like I mean, Jay Adams wore your shoes.
Yeah.
And I guess the other piece that we really want to kind of dive into here is, your entrepreneurial experience and how this could benefit other students. So prior to working with Tony Robbins, you also started a action sports industry company, and then you were the founder of a health and wellness network, which are two, pretty dissimilar businesses if you're just looking broadly. With working with two very different types of businesses, what were your key takeaways from these experiences that you applied to both, and what lessons from there applied to what you think most entrepreneurial business kind of settings?
Yeah, I think the biggest common denominator was throughout either of those businesses and throughout any business I will continue to grow and build, is it all comes back to working on yourself, right? I work for, some would say the number one success coach on the planet, right? He has multiple companies, multiple billion in revenue. And some of the biggest things I've learned through that I've seen were things that I did back in those businesses, is that in your business, you want to first and foremost understand that your psychology is the chokehold on your business, right? So if your business is at, whatever sales it is, and you want to go to the next level, your psychology is the chokehold. And as you look at business specifically, 80% of any success in any business comes back to psychology, and then 20% is the mechanics. And so throughout both of those businesses, the biggest emphasis that I had that is a common denominator, I would say, is that I hyper focused on this 80% of how can I grow my mind? How can I grow myself? And as you grow yourself, you will notice that your business starts to grow, because one of the most unbelievable things someone ever taught me, and this was sort of early on in my entrepreneur endeavors, is that you want to understand as an entrepreneur that you will never, and not just as an entrepreneur, as anything in life, that you are not paid for your time. You're never paid for your time. And that sounds crazy to people, but what you are actually paid for is you are paid for the value you add to the marketplace, right? So if you're going around and you're adding a little bit of value, that's why either your business or your job is paying you a little bit of money, because you have a little bit of value. If you can grow your value as a human being by working on yourself, by default, someone has to pay you more because you are more valuable to the market, right? So that's the biggest thing, I think, is working on yourself and growing yourself, growing your value. And as you do that, innately, whatever business you're in, that's going to grow as well. Or whatever job you're at, you will get a promotion quicker because you are more valuable.
Yeah, that's really interesting that the self-work is such a crucial piece of it, because you hit on, kind of like two really big points, which is that the business makes money not based on your time, like an hourly wage. It's how you can add value to the market. And you either have to, be adding a personal touch that is, some kind of intangible that people are willing to pay more for, or that you've worked hard enough on figuring out how to add value to the product or service.
Right. And like a simple example could be, let's say your psychology on an unconscious level is, I want to be really successful, but I'm scared to fail. What happens, and this happens a lot of the time in entrepreneurs, and it happens sometimes at an unconscious level, sometimes it's conscious, is we as a human being, we move either towards pleasure or away from pain. So what happens is, if you want success, but you are afraid to fail, those two are obviously go together to be successful, is you'll take 2 steps forward towards success and you'll go, oh, but I don't want to fail. So then you take 3 steps back. And if you don't do that internal work, then it's going to be harder to become successful. So that's like kind of a simple example of some of the things that may unconsciously be happening if you don't take the time to work on your internal self.
Yeah. So I guess my question is where would someone start? Like, if you're talking to students looking to do this work, where would be the starting point?
I would say two, 3 places. First, you could go to YouTube, and I'm going to give you 2 names, and I would just listen to them. The first is this guy named Jim Rohn, Jimrohn, and he is like the OG of personal development. Just Google him. He talks very weird, so be prepared for that. I'll give you a head start. He talks a little bit weird, but his knowledge is profound. The second thing I would say is start to look up Tony Robbins on YouTube, or you can get some of his books. If you want, you can come to one of his programs. And then the third thing I would say is go check out Finding Direction podcast, because we got a lot of value there too.
I love the plug, right?
Yeah, shameless plug.
Yeah, but that's part of the reason you're here. We're getting SDSU alumni to give advice to other SDSU students, soon to be alumni, right?
Right.
So this kind of gets into the more practical, some of the more like quick practical advice questions. Right now, there's a lot of uncertainty, especially, for people just graduating, right? Yeah. What advice do you have for those students, entering the workforce or entering the entrepreneurial space right now in the midst of this? If you had like 1-2 sentence bit of advice for people in that situation.
Yeah, stand out from the pack. And I'll keep it concise, but so many people graduate and they go through the traditional process of, let me apply for a job, get a job that way. I'm under the belief you want to leverage your network, not go through the job application process. And what I mean by that is, at SDSU, you've either built somewhat of a network, and there's something that, again, not to go down too deep of a rabbit hole, but there's things called strong ties and loose ties. Strong ties are your best friends. Loose ties are your acquaintances. And what they found out through studies is that oftentimes it's your loose ties, the people that are your acquaintances, that open doors that change your life. So what I would say is figure out who are the people you know that are associated with the industry that you want to be in, and how can you reach out to them? How can you network with them? And if there's one thing that you say to them that'll make you stand out, is whatever way you reach out to them, whether it's email, probably email, you want to ask them at some point in that email, hey, how can I add value to what it is you're working on? Is there anything you're working on that I can support? Can I add value to you? Can I volunteer for your organization? Just to add value, because when someone sees that, most people will reach out and say, hey, I know we met at this one time. Like, is there any way you could get me a job at this place? Or is there any way, you could hook me up and get me connected here? It's like, so many people ask them that. You want to separate yourself from the pack by saying, how can I add value? And another way you could separate yourself is say, hey, again, I want to take you to virtual lunch. I'll buy you lunch. And that can open that conversation where then you can sort of create that opportunity to start working for that company. So I would say that's a simple way to do it. And I would say, as we're in this COVID world, you can stand out more in the pack because a lot of people are freezing, right? Again, we go back to that 80% psychology, right? 80% of success in life is psychology. A lot of people may be graduating and going, oh, I don't know what to do. So complexity is the enemy of execution. So I'm just not going to do anything. So if you execute on that, you may be able to even get a better job than you could have if we were in a quote unquote normal world.
Yeah. So I guess to sum that up, what you were kind of saying was, so show initiative, and leverage your network, and not, the immediate network that you would think, and figure out how to communicate that value effectively. Right. So I guess that leads to the next question, which is, really what you do professionally, which is, when you're communicating in the business world, you have to always communicate, no matter what your role, to prospective clients, customers, other employees. So what advice would you give to recent alumni that need to sharpen those communication skills in regards to crafting their message that they're trying to get across?
And this is with public speaking, or more so just having conversations?
Just having conversations, email, in various mediums.
Yeah. So a very, very simple structure that I'll give you that you can use for communication, and this massively changed every aspect of my life. This is probably the most profound thing I've ever learned in my life, because I grew up as the shy kid. I grew up as the introverted, quiet kid that had no idea how to have conversations with people. I was truly I didn't know what people talked about. But when I learned this, it started the process of becoming a better communicator and networker. And it's a really simple acronym. It's called FORM. And it's FORM. And what it is it is a building block for communication. And so basically, the F stands for from, or family. The O stands for occupation. The R stands for recreation, and the M stands for motivation. And so all it is when you're having a conversation with someone, you ask them, oh, where are you from? Right? Oh, does your family live here? Right? You go to O, occupation. Oh, what do you do for work? R, recreation. What do you do for fun? M, what are your dreams, goals, aspiration, motivation? Right? And what will happen is you'll start to build a conversation in that. And I would say, if you want to go from having a conversation to connecting with someone, is the biggest thing you want to do is you want to find a common ground of interest. And if you just think for 2 seconds about your best friend in the world, the reason they're your best friend is because you have massive amounts of common grounds of interest with them, right? You both like the same things, so therefore you feel safe around them and you like them, right? So people's favorite thing in the world is themselves. And so if you can show them you're like them, they're going to like you more. And then in turn, as we go back into this networking process, they're going to want to help you more because they feel like you're like them. Right. So those are a couple simple things I would say you can start using is use form, right? Write out a couple questions that you could put in each letter and then use that as a building block of communication. And if you want to take it from a communication to a connection, see how you can build a common ground of interest with people on those and really start to relate to them there.
Yeah. And that's really interesting. I mean, that ties back to kind of one of the points we were talking about with like SDSU being a network, right? Because that immediate connection when you're reaching out to those people is your commonality of experience at college, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Which is a huge one of those, pieces of form.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you went to SDSU, I went to SDSU. It's like, oh, awesome. Let's go hang out.
Exactly. And then there's obviously that sort of one-on-one communication, connection, and small group communications, those are, really viable strategies. But I guess this leads into the next question, which you were kind of alluding to before, which is public speaking, right? Like in the workplace, you're going to have to do public speaking, whether it's internal or external. You're probably going to have to do some sort of presentation of a project or a report. And what do you see as the most fundamental strategies for effective public speaking, since you speak to so many thousands of people?
So I would say sort of what makes the difference between someone who crushes it when public speaking and someone who doesn't is someone who comes from their head versus someone that comes from their heart. And so if someone's in their head, my mentor Tony always says, if you're in your head, you're dead. Right. And so oftentimes public speaking is the biggest fear in the world. They say it's number 2 behind it is like being burned alive, which is insane. And the reason people hate public speaking sometimes, and it used to be my biggest fear, I used to definitely did not think it would ever be my profession. But it's because people, when they go to speak, they're wondering, what are other people thinking of them? Right. And now there's 20 eyeballs on you, let's say, right? Or 50 eyeballs, 100 eyeballs, however many, 10 eyeballs, 5 eyeballs, whatever it is. And people get so caught up in their head wondering, what are they thinking of me? What are they thinking of me? What are they thinking of me? And they get so caught up in that they can't go into their heart and actually speak on what they want to talk about. So one of my mentors, what I was taught is there's something called the 18-40-80 rule. And what it means in short is that when you're 18, you care what everybody thinks about you. And then eventually you get to 40 and you're like, screw it. I don't care what anybody thinks about me. I'm done with this. I don't care about what anybody thinks about me. And then you get to 80 and you go, holy crap, nobody was thinking about me the whole time. And so what you want to understand is that most people, they aren't, I don't want to say thinking, but a lot of people are in an unconscious loop. And so when you're giving a presentation, if people are really thinking, oftentimes they're not actually thinking about you. They're thinking about a million other things that are going on in their life, in their day. And so you just want to understand that don't go up and speak and wonder, what are they thinking about me? Wondering, how can I stay in my heart and how can I truly serve the message of whatever it is that I want to talk about, right? So that's a simple way to kind of go from your heart, from your head into your heart. And then just understanding the process that, and this, I don't really know the nice way to put it, but at first you're probably not going to be the greatest. You know what I mean? Like the first time I gave a presentation, I had a note card. I put it in my pocket. It was in front of 4 people, 4 of my friends. And I was sweating through my shirt. I felt like I was going to piss my pants. Halfway through the presentation, I pulled the note card out and started reading it. It was so awful. But my mentor, he always told me that a crappy plan today is better than a perfect plan tomorrow, because tomorrow doesn't exist. And so I just made a crappy plan. And how can I give my first speech? And it went really bad. But then I did it again, and I did it again, and I did it again, and I did it again. And eventually I did it enough times that I got good at it. So I would say those are kind of 2 basic things you can do to start helping you move in the wheels in that process.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, right? And it's refreshing to hear, somebody who wasn't initially, keen on public speaking.
Yeah, it was my biggest fear. I hated public. I was like, there's no way I'm ever getting in front of a room. Screw that. That is no. Yeah, it's wild.
It's a learned skill, right? It's like how comics go up and bomb while they're working through jokes.
Yeah, kudos to comics. You guys are champions.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's interesting too that you said it. People are worried about what people are thinking of you, and I have to speak in front of classes, and the way I think of it, it's the message, not the medium. People are there to hear what I have to say. They don't necessarily care about me personally, right? And that is something that I've thought about. But that kind of, you made that point, right? That is staying on message and making sure that the message is good is really where that sweet spot where you want to be.
Exactly.
And I guess, now speaking, through all these different technologies, kind of mediating public speaking has probably had an impact on the way that you approach things, right? Because the way that you receive the information, probably has an impact on how you process it. So have you seen any challenges of, communicating through different mediums and with, us speaking on Zoom right now? This is pretty apropos. And like, how do you keep up with all these changes and make sure that you're doing the right things across all these different channels?
Yeah. So in regards to like public speaking, and like transitioning sort of into the virtual speaking world versus the in-person speaking world, they're two, I wouldn't say totally different worlds, but have different aspects. And again, one thing I would say is as you dive into this, you want to find how can you separate yourself, because Zoom, I make jokes with people. It's like, we're going to put Zoom on our resume. We're going to be like, in 2020, I did 10,000 Zooms, right? But it's like most people get on a Zoom call and it's a very informative session. People sit back, they listen passively. And when that happens, retention's about 10%. So people aren't really retaining that much. So what I've done and what we've really adapted to in our sessions is we have people, they're engaging in their bodies, they're standing up, they're using their body, they're shouting answers back, they're taking notes, they're writing in the chat box, they're engaging in all these different ways, because that's how you take it from a sort of surface level learning to a nervous level learning, is by engaging in all these different ways. And when you do that, now when you have sort of a virtual session that you're leading, people walk away from that going, oh my God, that's different than anything I've ever been on. And they're going to remember the content for that reason, just because it was different, and also because of the different elements you've put into it. So I would say those are a couple really like staples as far as how we've taken it onto this new sort of medium with Zoom.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We've had similar challenges in higher ed, right? And it's interactivity, right? Because it's a lot harder to replicate in the virtual space.
Yeah. And just interesting things like, all right, if you understood that, like raise your hand and say yes. And it's like, it's silly things like that, but it's like when people do that, it's like, okay, if you hear what I'm saying, raise your hand. And it's like, people do that, they're going to start to stay more engaged. So it's, there's just little different ways to do it and play around with it and continuously learn.
Well, this has been, a great conversation, and I think there's going to be a lot of useful things here for the, the students to pick up on that they're going to, take into their post-graduation life. I just want to thank you again for joining us, Stu, for the latest episode of Fowler Success Safe at Home.
Thank you for watching this episode of Fowler Success Safe at Home. Subscribe for more stories from alumni about navigating the workplace in the new normal.